All right, so at this point you should have practiced your coils. You should have practiced some of the shapes. And now you're ready to actually start beginning to make your coil pots. In this particular case, to make the little bowls, or you can also make kind of globe forms. You will be adding the feet, but you add those later, or you may be adding handles. So you either need to add handles, add feet, or make it into a globe, or potentially all three, but at least one of those things. To do that, to get started with the body of the pot, you need to actually use a bowl. To make sure that your clay does not stick, you must line it first. If you just build your coils directly inside that bowl, they will not come loose and you will be unhappy. And there's nothing I can do to fix it successfully. So you need to line that. You could line it with paper towels, but that tends to dry out the clay. So I just usually use a bag down inside. You do not need to tape it. You can tape the plastic bag to itself if you want to, but don't tape it to the inside of the bowl or it will not help you. You can tape it to the outside if you want though. So now that I've got that, hopefully I've practiced and figured out what I want to do. I almost always start out with some spirals just because I really like spirals. So I'm going to start out with that. I'm going to come back around and I'm going to spiral back the other end of it as well. Remember, your clay needs to be somewhat soft. If it's not, it's going to cause you struggles. And I can make my pieces of clay as long as I want them to be. That will actually still work. I can make really big spirals. I don't need to make spirals at all. Really, you've got some options there. Think about what kind of design overall you're wanting to make. You need to be aware that you are going to be blending the inside of this. And like everything we do, don't be really shocked if your first one is maybe not one that survives. It's okay. Don't be afraid to fail on this first attempt. I don't want you to fail the class, but very often we have to try some things first, figure out what's working, what's not working. You've got to take some chances a little bit. So really think more about your design than I am right now. I'm just kind of speeding along there a little bit. And I'm doing some repetition of some things. And notice there are some gaps. I'll show you how to fix those in a little bit. Right now you don't need to be concerned with that. By the way, I made a bunch of coils in advance of this video so that you could see just the construction, so I didn't have to take time to roll more coils while I'm doing this. I may need to roll that a little bit more. That's just a little bit thick. Now, if you roll multiples in advance, or multiple coils in advance of your construction, you may need to cover those with plastic. Otherwise, they're going to dry out. The coils will dry out much quicker than a block of clay would. Okay, so I can also, now that that's in there, I can kind of wrap around some of those other shapes that are in there. But I need to completely fill that up. I'm going to show you one that I've already started, and I got that pretty well full. But the problem was my coils were a little bit dry. If you get to that point and they're a little bit dry, just mist them with water. You don't want to have water standing in there. That's going to cause you problems. But now that's really nice and shiny. I want to close that back up, and I want that to just soak that water in there. I don't want to try and do anything while the surface is still shiny. So I'm going to come back to this. Again, you do not need to do spirals. Just because I like spirals, that doesn't mean you have to. It doesn't mean you ever have to do a spiral on any of your pots, because that's your call. But whatever you choose to do needs to end up being well crafted. And that's really the key there. Craftsmanship is really important in ceramics, because if you don't have at least halfway decent craft, nothing will survive. Clay is forgiving in some senses and really brutal in others. If you don't follow at least some basic craftsmanship rules, again, you may end up with absolutely nothing to show for your hard work. And I would hate for that to be the situation. Okay, so I think I'm going to get just a couple more in there. Again, take more time than I'm doing on this. Now, as you're constructing, you need to already have in mind what you want to do in terms of what you're actually making. Are you wanting to have it like this one, where the top edge is irregular, so it's not just flat? Are you going to cut off the top and make it flat? Are you going to put two together to make more of a closed form, or are you going to leave it as a bowl? Are you going to make a set of them? What are you going to do? You have to figure that out first. I'm going to put one more little guy right there, and I'm going to put a little guy right there, and then I think I'm ready to start filling that in. So, got that last one filled in there. Maybe I could use a little something there. But I've got all those gaps, and I don't want to leave those gaps. I want to fill those in. That's where I can take more clay, so you can see the bowl through there. I want to take more clay. And again, I can make those little filler pieces, push those down inside there. And you may need to add quite a few. You may not have to add very many. Kind of depends on your design. Again, you're going to blend the inside. So I'm just going to put those in. And the little balls of clay can become a design as well. For example, where I've got larger spaces, those I might want to, add. I will have to add more, but fill those in and make a design out of that as well. If I just started to blend everything already, I'm going to have some struggles. Now, if you work slowly, let's say you don't get this done in one day, which I don't anticipate anticipate you taking, getting it all done in one class period. It's okay if you do, as long as it's well crafted. Some people work very quickly, some people don't. So long as it's well crafted and you still get everything done, both are okay. I'm going to let this top, I wanted it to be irregular, but I just realized if I want to show you how to make them combine into a globe, I'll need to make sure that that ends up being flat. But I have to fill in all those little gaps. Again, I'm just rolling those into little balls of clay. And even then, that's still not done, because it's not going to be structurally sound. Slow down, take more time than what I am. So from the inside, that's not looking so good. But that's okay, I'm going to blend those. A little chunk there, there. I know this is about like watching grass grow. Maybe up to watching paint dry. I suppose theoretically you could add texture to the outside of those before you push them in, but a lot of that will get squished. Okay, I'm almost done with filling those in. I've got one section, I think. Oops. I set the camera with my head. Sorry about that. And I know some of you really desperately want to add slip to the inside of this to blend it. You really don't need to, and it's really not helpful for you to. And if that seems like it's getting a little bit dry, and spray it, get it shiny, and then let it absorb so that you can really blend it. If you're trying to blend the clay and the surface is really shiny wet, really slippery, either because of water or slip, this does not work well. You don't move enough clay when the surface is wet. Do not just wet the surface and start smoothing. If you need to soften it, spray it, let it soak in. So you can see I'm just using my finger, or I guess my thumb, to blend that, and I'm just kind of blending at an angle a little bit. You don't want to push so hard that you flatten the outside, but you do want to really blend those things together. You've got to really watch those little spots, because if you don't blend those enough, and I'll show you another step on that, your piece will fall apart. And I have people do it all the time. If they don't blend well, stuff just falls right off of there. Okay, this is not smooth enough. I don't know how well you can see it in the video, but it needs to be really nice and smooth. And sometimes you end up with some really thin spots. And you can kind of see if it dips in there, then you probably need a ball of clay in that spot and blend that ball of clay out. So you want to make sure that it's really consistent, and anywhere that it seems like it's a little fragile, needs kind of like a band-aid or a splint, add that little piece of clay in there. You may want to, where you've got, like, I don't know if you can see, there's a little seam right there. I may want to put a little bit of clay there. Again, you just take a ball of clay. It needs to be soft enough to be really blendable. Doesn't need to be sticky, but still soft. If it's getting too dry, you must spray it and let it soak in. You can do that multiple times. But if you're trying to blend or use dry clay or clay that's too dry, it will not work for you. Welcome to try it, but you have to kind of accept there are limits to each stage of clay. So let's say that I've got that all done. You may need to come back with one of the little rubber tipped tools. If you have not talked to you, if I've not told you yet, this one with the cone tip is my very favorite. You can use other ones as well, but you want to really seal up those little seams. If you don't, again, those will just crack and fall apart. So get in there. The wooden tool that's like a sharpened pencil, that works really well too. Sometimes you have to clean off the tip of your tool, but you've got to get that sealed. I can say it over and over again and people don't always catch it, but you've got to seal it. Because things will seem like they're really stuck together now, but there's surface tension. And that clay, when it's sticky, it'll hold together. But once the clay is no longer sticky, if you've either not blended well or when kneaded, scored, and slipped, things don't stay together. So you can't judge it when it's wet, whether it's going to stick together. Okay, that's relatively well sealed. Take your time though. Just like before, you can use a wet sponge to wipe your fingers off and take your damp fingers over the piece. But don't be tempted. A lot of times people want to spray it and then they want to blend around when that clay is wet. That does not help you. When it's just really shiny and wet like that, it actually can kind of weaken the surface. I don't know what I was trying to say there. But if it's really shiny wet, you're really not blending much. Your fingers are just sliding over the surface and not accomplishing very much. So I kind of spread that water around enough that it worked there. So also, again, don't just use a bunch of slip in there. It's okay if your fingers are wet or if the surface is a little bit wet as you're doing a final smoothing. But when you're blending those together, you want the clay to be soft, but you do not want it shiny. Okay, so now at this point, if you're not done and you're done for the day, close it up and put it away. All right, so just put it on your shelf, not out on the grid, on your shelf. Then the next day you just open that up, you keep working. So the cleanup aspect of this is really easy. Let's say you are finished with your construction and your smoothing. Notice how that just pops right out of there. Be careful though, this is still very fragile. Don't just let it dry in the bowl. Anytime you're smoothing, you've got to make sure that you've got it braced on the outside. So this is pretty soft yet. And it's okay that there's some bag texture, that's okay. I do need to let this dry a little bit more before I do the next step. But that's pretty much it for this stage of construction. You may want to come back and do some cleanups if you need to. Again, make sure that all of those little seams where it's open at the top, you want to really seal those, and then we'll dry them very slowly so that they don't come apart. But get that, see, hopefully you can see right there, that seam right there. I had not cleaned that up yet. I had not sealed that, and that would have almost certainly come apart once it was dry. A lot of times people don't seal those enough, and every time the clay will, tell you, it doesn't lie at the end. You won't be able to say, oh no, I cleaned those up, I attached those. Even if you do it a little bit, if it falls apart, it means you didn't do it enough. So that is still really wet. So I'm actually going to put it back in the bowl. So I'm going to set the bag there, and I'm going to let that go down inside. I'll push down very gently. But notice I put the bag back on there. I can hair dry this a little bit if I need to speed that along. So I'm going to stop this and then pick up with feet, etc.